right, almost there. Done. Okay. Let's see, we have the picture. Yeah, looking good. Okay, I don't need it here. Know that it is recording. And with that, we can go back to our slides. Okay, so what we're going to do today is running together what we call a lightweight trial of Jfrog products, or Jfrog. We will run Jfrog demo environment. So before we do anything, go now to try.jfrog.com and start your trial there. My name is Baruch Sadogurski. I'm the Jfrog developer advocate at jbaruch on Twitter. You should follow me now. Very interesting tweets usually. And today we're going to talk about many things. So we're going to talk about So we're going to talk about what is Jfrog Artifactory, what is Jfrog X-Ray, real quick, and then we will review the environment that we are going to play with. We're going to talk about about creating the application file, Docker-based image, Docker production image, etc., and generally cover all the environment that you can get at try.jfrog.com. So again, before we start, let's go to try.jfrog.com and spin up our trial. And then while it starts, we will go back and talk about what we're going to see. So I'm going to try.jfrog.com. And here we go. We need to sign in. If you don't have an account, obviously you will create one instead of signing in. And now you will have a start trial button. I have a restart button because I obviously already did that. So click on start and the deployment will start. It takes about 5 minutes. So while it spins up, we're going to get back and talk about it. Now, since it's a hands-on lab, it's very important for us to interact. I have my chat window open. So if you have any questions, something doesn't work for you, feel free to type it in the chat. If you think it's interesting for everybody, go ahead and share it with everyone. Chatting with panelists only actually means chatting with me. So if something doesn't work and you're too embarrassed to ask other people, you can always ask me and no one will know. So I hope everybody managed to start. I'm sorry, I completely missed the usual technicalities. So everybody are on mute because it's webinar. And as I mentioned, the way to interact with me is through the chat window. There is also a Q&A version, a Q&A panel for maybe more of generic questions that I will take towards the end of the webinar. The recording is actually going now in our YouTube channel. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I hope you can hear me and see me. Okay, yeah, let me know if something, okay, good, thank you very much. Yeah, we had some technical glitch here. So yes, the recording is live now on YouTube. You can go to the Jfrog YouTube page, youtube.com/user/Artifrog, or just search for Jfrog, and the recording will be there afterwards. You will also get a follow-up email with the recording within a couple of days. So it's all good. Okay. Now you see my screen, right? What you should see is the deployment, which is, I think, is about done now. Yeah, it is. So we can see the trial is in progress. I hope you have the exact same image on your screen. If you want to maybe take a couple of more minutes, if you have, or seconds. If you have any problems, again, let me know. I'll assume that your trial is starting or already started, and with that, we'll get back to, and cover some basic while it starts. So I would like to start with a short poll to just to check what is your level of familiarity with Jfrog products, so I will know to adjust the explanation level. So let me start this one. Here you go. So it's two simple questions. First is how familiar are you with Artifactory, and the other is how familiar are you with X-Ray. So please feel free and vote. We'll take it a minute. We will give it a minute so you will have time to vote. Okay, we have a good number of votes. I'll close the poll now, share the results with you. And since the results are not shown in our video recording, I will just mention them briefly. So the majority of you did some basic work with Artifactory. Some of you never heard of it, some of you never used it, but the majority used an open source version or used it as a simple proxy and repository. Almost half of you used build integration, which is good because we're going to see it today. And for those of you who didn't, you will first see it today. And with X-Ray, a lot of people, almost half of you never used it, more than half never heard about it, more than half of you never used it, which again, it's a good thing because I will show it to you today and you will for sure be excited. Okay, so thank you very much for that. And now we can go and talk a little bit about Artifactory and X-Ray. So we're going to start with a diagram that I love because it shows very nicely the big picture of what we are doing here. And everything starts with the developers writing code. Obviously, they are the producers of our software, so they are writing code. And while they are writing code, they use different tools. They use different programming languages, Java, .NET, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, whatever, and they use dependency managers with those tools. And those dependencies using those dependency managers, they add new dependencies, so they will reuse open source components or components of other teams inside their organization. So they declare new dependencies, and then eventually, while their code should be runnable and they're ready to move on, they try the build on their own machine. So they will use their build tools, their dependency managers, to run the code. And when they use when they ask for a new dependency, this dependency manager or a build tool will try to fetch those dependencies from external resources, from external repositories or registries. And if configured correctly, they will try to fetch it from Artifactory. Now, here two possibilities exist. One is this dependency already cached in Artifactory, it will be served directly. And if this dependency is not yet cached in Artifactory, Artifactory itself will know how to resolve those dependencies from remote registries and repositories, like JCenter or Maven Central, NPM registry, Docker Hub, NuGet Gallery, etc. So, and then the dependency will be cached in Artifactory, returned to the developer, and hopefully the build is successful and the developer is ready for the next stage. The next stage will be committing the changes to the version control, Git, or any other that you are using. And once the changes are committed, next thing that happens is the CI server kicks in. The CI server will check out the changes and run exactly the same build. It will use the same build tools, the same dependency managers that the developer used, but this time it will be integration of all the changes from all the developers since the last commit. And then, since it is the same build, the dependency managers and the build tools will need the same resources. So again, they will get to Artifactory to download the dependencies that they need. And this time the dependencies are guaranteed to be in Artifactory just because they are already cached. So then the dependencies will be resolved, the build will complete successfully, hopefully again, and then the artifacts that were produced will be deployed to Artifactory with a bill of materials. We're going to talk a lot today about bill of materials. It's a lot of metadata that we gather during the build. Now, once this is done, once we have produced this artifact to produce those binaries, the continuous integration or continuous pipeline starts. We have a lot of components into this pipeline, the different types of checks. It's unit tests, integration tests, stress tests, behavioral tests, UI tests, manual QA, and also Jfrog XR. So Jfrog XR participates in this pipeline, contributing more metadata about artifacts. We're going to talk about it soon enough. At every step of the pipeline, this metadata added, and then there is a decision need to be made whether those artifacts should be promoted to the next step. And those decisions are made based on this metadata. Did all the checks pass? Did the QA signed off this build? Did Jfrog XR found any issues with those artifacts? They promote it to the next step of the pipeline, all the way until they go to production. And then, of course, they need to be deployed. They need to be deployed in case of your software is a deployable software, as opposite to downloadable or distributable software. Deployable software is what you deploy on your own servers, which can be bare metal on-prem or virtualization in the cloud or any combination of those, but it's generally servers which are in your control. And then you use tools that you usually use for deployment, stuff like Chef, Puppet, Docker, Ansible, whatever. And using those tools, again, based on the metadata that we collected about artifacts, those artifacts are actually deployed to production. The other type of software is downloadable software. Downloadable software is software that you need to distribute to people, and you usually use it using your download center or other resources available on the web, maybe stuff like Jfrog bin tray or S3, but of course Jfrog bin tray we can definitely recommend as a good backend for your software distribution for the download center of your organization. That's kind of the big picture. And now let's talk a little bit about X-Ray. So X-Ray is a tool that, as I mentioned, participates in your continuous pipelines. And what it does, it realizes the packages, the artifacts, the software that you have in Jfrog Artifactory, and does a software composition analysis. What it actually does, it analyzes the artifacts in Artifactory to construct what we call a component tree. This component tree is actually artifacts within other artifacts within other artifacts. Of course, we will see example in our demo environment later, but think about a Docker image which has a Debian package inside, we have an archive inside, which have some application file npm application file inside, and Jfrog X-Ray is the one that will build this tree using a long list of technologies that we are aware of. And on this tree, we can ask questions. So we can ask, are there any vulnerable artifacts? Are there any artifacts with incompatible license? Are there any artifacts that we don't want for various reasons? For example, we don't want them because the version we decided that it's too old and we want a new one, or maybe we connected our profiler to X-Ray and decided the performance of this artifact is not good enough, and now we cannot use it. So there are various reasons of why we can make those decisions, but those decisions are actually impacting our pipeline and might prevent, for example, artifacts from promoting in the pipeline. We will see this example as well. So this is the big picture, and now let's talk about stuff that we are actually going to do today. Before we continue, if you are joining now, you need to go to try.jfrog.com and then spin up your environment, just to show you how it looks like. So you will get here to this page after you log in or create a new account, and you will have a button of start a new trial. You will click on this button. It will take about a couple of minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, and then you will see this picture when you have a trial in progress and you have the environment log. While it is starting, we are talking about what we are going to see today. So if you didn't do it yet, please go to try.jfrog.com and spin up your environment. We're going to get back to it very soon. So now let's look at what we are going to do today. Which pipelines do we have? So first of all, that's the big setup. This is what you have as an environment when you spin off this trial. So you have 2 Artifactory instances running in an active highly available cluster. One of them run on port 8081, the other on port 8082. They are both connected to a database. In our example, it is MySQL database, but of course it can be any other. We use an Nginx as our load balancer. Again, in your environment, it could be any other load balancer, and it is configured on ports 80, 443, and the range of ports between 5000 and 5010 for Docker, as a Docker proxy. We are going to talk about that as well. On the side of it, we have Jfrog X-Ray installed on port 8000, and it is speaking with Artifactory through this Nginx load balancer. We also have Jenkins installed on port 8080, and it also speaks with Artifactory using port 80 on our load balancer. So this is the big picture. Those are the players that we have. And now we're going to review today 3 different pipelines. So first pipeline will create our application war file. We will use Java as example, but of course, no Java knowledge necessary for today's run, and generally it doesn't really matter. It can be .NET, it can be native C++ with Conan, it can be JavaScript with NPM, Python, Ruby. Java is just the most popular example that we have. This is why we're using it, but think about any other. So what we are going to do is completing those steps. So we have a Gradle build, and Gradle is one of the Java build tools, one of the leading Java build tools. So Gradle build will compile the Java code that we have, run some unit tests, and then Jenkins will deploy the artifacts that are created during this build, and we'll deploy it to Artifactory. After those artifacts are deployed to Artifactory, they will be then scanned by Jfrog X-ray to find if we have any vulnerabilities and such. In case we do have something suspicious, we just won't use this build of Java in our further pipeline. The second pipeline that we are going to view to look in today is our Docker base image. We're going to build a Docker image which will serve as our base. This is very important to have your own base image with all the infrastructure stuff that you need, kind of a framework build. And then when you use a Docker, when you actually need to build your own application Docker image, you will use this image as a base. So that's exactly what we are using. We're going to run a Docker pull on some base image of Ubuntu, and then we are going to add our infrastructure, our framework that we need. In our example, it will be JDK8 and Tomcat on this one, and this will be our base image, Ubuntu with Java and Tomcat installed. Once this build is complete, we're going to deploy it to Artifactory and again scan with Jfrog X-ray. Again, if anything fishy is found, we won't use this base for our application. The third one is the Docker application itself. Now, this is where we're going to take our base on the first step and then add the input from our Java application, our WAR file that we built, and then we're going to test it. Once it is tested and the test is successful, we're going to deploy it to Artifactory and run Jfrog X-ray, sorry about it, and run the Jfrog test on it, Jfrog X-ray test on it. If everything is okay and we have approval from X-ray, then we can run some more tests, and if everything looks good, we're going to promote this artifact to release, and that will be our product release. So it's good that you ask questions because I can stop and explain a little bit stuff that wasn't clear. So the question was, is Jfrog X-ray similar to Sonar or SonarQube or something in the type? Well, it is similar in a way. So it does checks that are part of the pipeline. The difference is in types of checks that X-ray does. So we don't do the quality checks that Sonar does. Instead, the X-ray out of the box, the default setup of X-ray checks for security vulnerabilities and license compliance issues. But thank you for the questions. Please keep them coming. All right, so those are the three pipelines that we have, and just to show you how the last pipeline works, because it's kind of a more complicated than the other. So here's the flow. So what we start is the Jenkins build, right? So we have the first step is the Jenkins build itself. When it is done, we will upload the build to Artifactory. And then we will, Jenkins will ask Artifactory to scan the build in X-ray. Artifactory will propagate this request to X-ray. X-ray will scan the build. And if something didn't work, it will send the alert. And we will get this alert by email or in the UI. We'll use the UI in our example. And then ask Jenkins to fail the job. This request will be propagated to Jenkins, and Jenkins will fail the job if something didn't work out. So this is how the more complicated Docker application works. So now we are ready, and before we start, there is one very important preparation step. And first of all, let's see that we successfully started our trial. So go back to your trial page, and what you should see here is this screen, Jfrog demo environment, trial in progress. You have almost full 4 days remaining, and this is very, very important. You have here a way of view or download the documentation. Please do that, because what we're going to go to do for the remaining hour is going through this documentation and actually doing whatever is written here. So I downloaded it here, and this is how it looks like. It has all the information about this trial. That's the overview that we just did. Actually, next step will be this one, so we're going to talk about it in a second. And then it has the same overview that I just did, actually using the same graphics as well. So please do that. Please view or download the documentation. Another very important part of the screen is the environment log. It is also very, very important because it contains both the IP that we are going to need in the next step and the password that you are going to use to log in into all of the tools. It's the same password for Artifactory, for X-Ray, and for Jenkins. So we're going to copy it and use it as well. So those two critical pieces to start with, the documentation and the environment log. And now we have the one single preparation step, which in my experience is the most complicated one, although it's not very hard. If you manage to go through that, everything else will be much easier. What we need to do is to map the IP of our virtual machine on the Google servers, that's our Orbiter trial, to a Jfrog local host. And that's because all of the URLs in Artifactory, X-Ray, and Jenkins are working with this Jfrog local host name, just because the URLs are constantly changed. So if you are looking here, I have the URL, this is the URL of my trial, you have another one. Since we couldn't anticipate which IP you will get, instead we are using this Jfrog local host, which requires from you to configure your unique IP that you got from Orbitera to Jfrog local. And you do that differently for different operating system times. All right, so thank you very much, Brian, for this comment. I apparently share not the right thing. So okay. How about now? Do you see the trial screen? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Now it's good. So going back, I will repeat what I started to say. This is the screen that you need to see now when your trial is up and running. And the important parts are the documentation that you should view or download, does the same, opens the PDF file, and the environment log. Environment log, you have two important pieces of information here. First is the IP that is unique for each and every one of you. And the second is the password, which is also unique for each and every one of you. And this is the password of both Artifactory, X-Ray, and Jenkins in our trial environment. So all three products use the same password, so it will be easy. Now, what we need to do is to map this unique IP to the Jfrog local host, which everybody use. So what we're going to do depends on your operating system. If you are on Mac, what you need to do is edit your etc hosts files. And I'm on Mac, so I'm going to show how to use it now. If you are on Windows, you need to edit your Windows System 32 drivers etc hosts. It's actually the same file, it's in the same format. The location is different based on the operating system. So Mac and Linux etc hosts, Windows, Windows System 32 drivers etc hosts. You can edit it with whatever tool you prefer. I'm going to use VI from my terminal, but of course, feel free to use anything else. Since it's a system file, I need to edit it as a super user. etc hosts. And this is my etc host. So I have here an old IP from my previous trial. I need to use the new one instead. So the IP that I'm going to use is actually the same, is this IP that I have here. I can select it, or I can just go to Artifactory and then select it from here and paste it right here. So I need it as an IP, and this is how it should look for you. You should have your own unique IP from the trial screen, and then the host Jfrog, Jfrog local. That's the host that our demo environment uses. So that's the host that you should use. So basically, that's the line that you need to add. While on the right, on the left, you will have your own IP. It's let me know if it works. Okay, so now we can save the file. And the test that we need to run is very simple. We're going to go to our browser, and in our browser, what we're going to do is use Jfrog local instead of the IP. And what we expect to see is actually Artifactory coming up. Here you go. Right, if we see that, that means that we successfully configured our Jfrog local to our IP. Now we can go back to our environment screen and see what else we need to do. So this is our Artifactory URL. It's not this IP anymore. Instead, it's a Jfrog local. This is the password, so we can copy the password and log in. The username is admin, and the password is this URL, that is this password that we just saw, and we're going to log in, and now we are admin, and let's save the password. Here you go. All right. Now we can also log in into Jenkins and into X-Ray. We're going to need them, of course, as well. So it all will be Jfrog local now, and the ports will be 8080 for Jenkins. Here we go. This is our Jenkins admin, and again, the password that we copied. This is our Jenkins with our builds that we are going, of course, to examine. And the last tool that we need to log in will be X-Ray. Jfrog local 8000 is our X-Ray port. And again, admin and the password that we saved. Now we are logged in into X-Ray as well. Okay, their stuff is going on. We are going to talk about all of them in a second. So again, set Jfrog local to the IP that you got from the trial, from the environmental log. You do it in hosts file, which is located under etc folder for Mac and Linux, or in C Windows System32 drivers etc folder. Now, as I mentioned, all those instructions that we just did, everything we just did, also written in the documentation that you can download from the trial page. So if you feel that you missed something or you fall behind, feel free to catch up in the documentation. So here's, for example, the explanation of how you see, of how you set the Jfrog local mapping to your IP. And here's an explanation how you do it with etc hosts or on on Windows. Okay, so I assume that you managed to do that, and okay, all right. So what I see here is that we might have some kind of misconfiguration, and trial.jfrog.com takes some people to a wrong trial. So I'm going to post in the whoever is not able to configure to see X-ray and X-ray won't open for them. I'm going to send a list now. I'm going to send a link now that you need to use instead of try.jfrog.com. I'm really sorry about the misconfiguration. So here you go. Check your chat window, and I'm going to, yeah, so you'll be able to copy paste from there. We do have two different trials, and apparently we had some misconfiguration for some of you. So jfrog.orbitera.com link that is in the chat window now should take you to the right trial. And concurrent usage, apparently it's another problem that we're facing now, and let me see what we can do about that. Well, the joys of a concurrent live demo, right? So let me take care of that as well. Okay, in the meanwhile, whoever managed to get to the etc host file but is unable to save it, that's because editing an etc hosts or a host file requires an super user or administrator permissions. So with on Mac on Linux, you can just edit it with sudo command. For Windows, you either need to open it as an administrator, or if you edit it from a command line, you need to open an administrator command line first and then edit it. The URLs are different for all three tools. Once you manage to set up your etc hosts, the URL for Artifactory will just be Jfrog local. For your Jenkins, it will be Jfrog local on port 8080, and X-ray will be under Jfrog local port 8000. Okay, so again, I apologize for the misconfiguration. Apparently, try.jfrog.com, the link that I keep repeating, so you will go there. Starts a trial without X-ray. It only starts Artifactory and Jenkins. We're checking what we can do now. Just give me one more minute, and it also will be good for the people who are still struggling with their host files, and we will find a solution for that. Yeah, so while we are working in Jfrog trying to figure out the problem with the misconfiguration, and you are working on your etc host file, here's a good question about where the vulnerabilities in X-ray come from, and the answer is the internet. So we generally have, I think, about 8 different sources for vulnerabilities in the internet, including National Vulnerability Database and many others, and we get updates from all of them. X-ray is updated daily with new vulnerabilities. Yeah, and I see that some people actually got lucky with X-ray and other not so much. So again, apologies for the misconfiguration. Probably maybe we have some load balancer that just points some of the people to different versions of trial. So we are working on that. And what we are actually working now is the removing the limitation of having 2 trials running concurrently for the same person. Because if you already started your trial without X-ray, you need to start another one now with X-ray, and this is something that wasn't supported normally because you shouldn't have 2 trials running in the same time. But since we have this issue and we're trying to remove this limitation, so the folks who already started without X-ray will be able to start another one with X-ray at the same time. That's our what we're trying to do now. Okay, while this is in the makings, while we are configuring our trial environments, let's actually get to business and see what's going on. Again, I apologize for those who couldn't follow up with us now, but we will make sure it is happening. We are changing the settings now. We will let you know in a second that this change propagated, and you can use the right link that I posted in the chat, and you will be able to start a concurrent trial with X-ray. Okay, let's go back to what we're trying to do. Okay, so I got a message that it should be good. Okay, a couple of things to try. I'm not sure what the configuration change they did. First of all, just try to log into X-ray. People who did mention to do it, I don't believe it will work because it didn't start, but give it a try. And that what should actually work is that you should able to use the link that I posted and start another trial with X-ray now. That actually what should work. So let me know if that what you see. Folks, let me know if you manage to start another trial with X-ray. I will post the right URL again in the chat window. This one. You don't need to stop the old trial, although of course it will save us resources, so it will be nice of you if you do. But now you can just start another trial using the link that I sent you. We would definitely appreciate if you stop the old one. Okay, so we still see that people have the same error. We're going to recheck the configuration again. In the meanwhile, while we recheck, okay, here, okay, thank you for the reports. I love how it works. This is how live session should work. The fix is to actually stop an old one and then start a new one. So the configuration is still not allowing two concurrent runs, but once you stop the old one, you can start a new one. That's how it, again, should work. And let me know if that's not what you see. Okay, so we got a couple of reports that it works, and thank you. I appreciate your patience and sticking with us on this one. So let's actually go back and start reviewing our pipelines and everything else. So now we have, and hopefully you will have very soon the same picture of all three of our tools running, both Artifactory, X-ray, and Jenkins. So we're going to start our journey to see what's going on with Jenkins. So you have here actually 5 pipelines. We spoke about 3 of them. There are 2 additional ones, Maven examples. If that's what you use and that's what you are interested in, all the descriptions are available in the documentation of the trial. But we're going to look at those 3. And as I mentioned, we will start with an application war file. So I'm going to take a look at the setup of this pipeline, so we will understand what is going on. So this is our setup, and if you are not familiar with Jenkins, if you are familiar with Jenkins, you will feel at home. If not, no despair. Jenkins is using a groovy DSL to configure a build. And it's very simple and straightforward, so you will be able to follow along even if you are not familiar with Jenkins or with this DSL. So what is going on here is that we configure a couple of parameters. We configure where this build is going to deploy the artifacts and retrieve the artifacts, and that's of course our Artifactory server URL. And here we use our Artifactory from the trial, Jfrog local. Gradle, which Gradle should be used, and this is something that configured inside Jenkins. Deploy repository, to which repository our build will be deployed. Server URL, that's again an Artifactory server URL. X-ray scan, should we perform X-ray, yes or no? And should we clean the Jenkins repo before the build? But should we clean the Gradle cache before the build? This generates a cleaner build because we will re-download all the dependencies, but of course takes more time. So this is our environment variables, and here is our script. So as I mentioned again, even if you're not familiar with Jenkins or Jenkins DSL or Groovy, it still won't be a big problem for you to understand. Let's open some editor so you will see the code better. So I'm going to paste this script into Atom, so we will see the code. Let me just say that it's Groovy. Okay, here we go. Right, so what we see here is first piece is the configuration. So we configure Artifactory server, and we configure it with the server ID that I showed you previously, and that will be our Artifactory. And then we say that we are going to use a Gradle build. And the stages are, we are going to check out the code, and that's just a Java example that we're going to build. We check out the project examples, and then we configure our Artifactory. So we're going to use this Gradle. We're going to deploy to this repository. We're going to resolve from libs release. This is not configurable in our properties because this is the repository we should resolve from. And we're going to add some properties here to the deployment. We're going to say that the unit test passed, and some other properties. Those of course are just the examples. Sorry for the pauses. I'm trying to support a couple of folks here that have trouble, so I'm sorry for the interruptions. Okay, we added some properties for they will be deployed with the artifacts, and here is the interesting part. Artifactory.buildinfo. This is how we collect the information about the build, and of course we will see in Artifactory in a minute what it looks like. So we collect all the information about the build, and we collect the environment variables, and they will be deployed with artifacts to Artifactory, right? And then we execute our Gradle. If we ask to clean the repo, we will nuke the Gradle cache. Otherwise, we will just run our Gradle build in running the build in Gradle examples. And the last step, what we're going to do is publish the build information and scan the artifacts in X-ray. So server.publish build info, we're going to publish the build info, and if this X-ray scan is set to yes, then we are going to ask Artifactory to run a server scan, and then all we do here is print the scan result. Although of course scan result is a real object that we can do all different types of smart logic in it. So we can examine if it has only minor vulnerabilities, maybe we want this build to continue. If it has major vulnerabilities, maybe we want to fail the build, this kind of stuff. It also have default behavior. For example, failed build can be set to true, and then if we have vulnerabilities, the build will be failed by default, right? So we have some flexibility here of what we want to do after the scan results are received. So this is our build, and we can actually go ahead and run it and see what's going on. So we run the build here. and those are the configuration parameters that we saw. The server URL. Should we do the X-ray run scan? Should we clean the repo? And we can go ahead and start this build. So, and it is running. You can see all the steps here in the pipeline. We can, of course, also see the command line in the console output. And here we see the build starting. We check out our source, we configure everything, and here Gradle is starting. It downloads all the dependencies. All the dependencies are downloaded from Jfrog local Artifactory. That's exactly what we wanted. And eventually it will, that's the scan result. Here you go. And eventually it will deploy the artifacts to Artifactory. Once the artifacts are deployed to Artifactory, next will be deploying the build info. That's the information we collected. The build is successful, and now we ask to scan it with X-ray. And here is the result. Build number 12 was scanned, and one alert was generated. We can go ahead and see the alert. So we're going to click on this URL to see it. And here we'll see the summary of it. We have an alert with some vulnerabilities here and impacted artifacts. And as I mentioned, that's a JSON object that you can you can act upon. Apologies again, trying to multitask here, and being a male, I'm not very good in it. This is my alert. This is X-ray. Actually, that's the URL that's been opened, and you see here on top the build number 12. That's the alert that we got. It is in critical shape, and we can start and look what's going on here. So what we see here is that bunch of CVEs, bunch of security vulnerabilities, and they are all somewhere inside my WAR file. And here I see, okay, I have used struts. And as you remember from Equifax incident, using struts is not the best thing to do. And I use struts to here inside my WAR file, inside my build. Right. So here is we're going to look deeper into X-ray into X-ray later. So this is our first build, and let's look on it in Artifactory. You can go in Artifactory build info directly from Jenkins. Just click on this button, and you are in X-ray, and you are in Artifactory. And what you see here is all the information that we collected from Jenkins about the build. So you can see here that you see the general build info, what was the name of the build, the number, how it was built, by whom, how long it take, etc., etc. And you also have the URL back into Jenkins, Jfrog local 8080. This is our Jenkins instance. You can see the published modules. Well, it was multi-module Gradle build, and that's the WAR file that we built. It uses a bunch of dependencies, including, of course, including, of course, the struts that we just saw in X-ray as vulnerable, and the environment variables are collected as well. So if you have any questions about the environment that was in Jenkins during the build, which is a critical information that if you don't collect is lost forever, you can actually filter by it here, and you can say, like, I want to see my Java version. Here you go. That's my Java version 1.8. We can compare builds with each other. We can say, okay, how this build is changed from number 11. And it will show us the list of all the changed artifacts and all the changed dependencies and all the changed environment variables, etc. Now, as you remember, so we can also navigate to the artifacts from build directly. So if we're going back to our build here real quick, here, we can go to our published modules and go to the WAR file itself. So here you can see the properties, for example, that we set. If you remember, we set a couple of properties. We set the unit test to pass and QA team to be platform and UI. Here they are, but there are also some implicit properties like the build timestamp, the build number, and the build name. And this is how those artifacts are correlated to the build information that we actually saw previously. We can go here and see the relationship in the build tab, and we can go and navigate to this build ID or to the module directly inside the build or to the CI server back to our Jenkins. We can also see the whole JSON format. This is how it looks like, and that's exactly what's been collected in Jenkins and sent to Artifactory. That's all the information, including everything that we saw there. So this is our Java build. So far, good stuff. You understand how it works, but now let's start and complicate things by adding Docker, obviously. And that means that we want to go to our Jenkins. And we can go, for example, from here and take a look at our next pipeline. So our next pipeline will be Docker image, base Docker image, or how we call it, Docker image template. That's our framework build. It creates the base image for the rest of us. So here we can examine the configuration again. And again, it has some parameters, credentials for our Docker registry, server URL, Artifactory Docker registry, the repository that we are going to use. Now we're going to use promotion, so we need both repositories, the repository that we are going to promote from and the repository that we are going to promote to, server URL, and the X-ray scan. Again, let's take our script to a more comfortable editor, and let's see what's going on. So again, as in a previous example, we are checking out some repository on GitHub, set up Artifactory server URL, and spin off a new build info. It will again collect all the information, including the environment. And then we have the stage in which we are going to download the dependencies that we need to add to our Ubuntu base image. And what we need is Java and Tomcat. We're going to download them, of course, from Artifactory, and we're going to use a feature which is called download spec, and that's a feature of the Artifactory Jenkins plugin. We're going to say, okay, that's the file that we are looking for. It is inside Tomcat local directory, and put it inside some folder on Jenkins workspace environment, and we're going to use it in the next step. Again, let's download another file, which will be our Tomcat, and we're going to put it into another folder in our workspace. After this is done, after we say, okay, download this spec and add it as dependencies to our build info, so we will see them because they are dependencies of our Docker file. Next, what we need to do is start our build. So with our build, what we are going to do is run a Docker build. So we configure Docker, we log into it, and then we run our build file. So our build file is in our GitHub that we checked out, our GitHub repository that we checked out, and this will be our repository. So let's go there and take a look at our Docker file. Okay, did it open? Yes. So it will be in the automation directory Docker framework. This is our Docker file. This is what is going to run when this command docker build is running. So what we see here is a couple of things. So first, we copy the JDK that we already downloaded from Artifactory inside our image. Second, we do the same with a Tomcat. We copy it inside our image, and then of course we configure it. We put it in the right place and everything else. So once we did those things, once we copied Java and copied Tomcat, we can now run Tomcat. And now what we actually have is a base image which is built on our local latest of Ubuntu, which might be different from the real latest of Ubuntu. And we added Java to it. We configure it in the right place. We configure Java Home, added Tomcat to it. Again, configured all the right things, and then run Tomcat. So after this Docker file, after this run, after this build, we will actually have a proper base image with configured Java and Tomcat. So getting back to our build here. So we did that. Now the next step that we're going to take is testing our framework. The easiest way to test our framework is just taking the last successful application and try running it and do the tests. If the application that we know that was good is successfully run on the new framework build, it means that we didn't break anything and the new framework build is actually good. So we're going to download the latest known WAR file. We're going to Gradle release local and download the latest build. That means download any WAR files, but since we actually ask for the one with the property, we will get the latest one. And now once we downloaded the latest WAR file here in download, we can actually add a new line in our Docker file, and that will be the line that adds this WAR file, and run another Docker build because we need a new image with the latest application, and actually try to do stuff. Here we don't do much because it's not a real application, but here is where after you build a new Docker image, this is where you test it. Okay, so we have here test framework, and test framework is actually here test framework. We run curl, we get a result, we check if the results is what we looked for, and then this is kind of silly test that we do here, right? So we do this test, and once test is done, we know what to do. And if test is successful, then we update the property, we add a new property, functional test pass, and then we can actually remove this image that we only built for tests. If that's not the case, we will set the functional test to fail, and we will mark this build as unstable, and again remove the temporary Docker image that we built. Next step will be X-ray scanning. Again, you already saw that. We ask Artifactory server to run an X-ray scan. We provide this config, and again, we don't do much except of printing the X-ray results, which of course shouldn't be the case when you do it in your environment in production. The last things that we are going to do is, if everything was okay, if the test passed, and if X-ray scan didn't find anything, promoting our Docker framework to the next stage, which will be, it is released and we can use it. And again, we're going to use features of Artifactory plugin. We're going to call Artifactory server promote and give it a promotion config. Promotion config is a piece of JSON that configures what should be done. So we say we want to promote this build name and build number, and we want to promote it to promote repo. That will be our comment. Framework test works fine. We want to promote it from the source repo, and the status that we want to set will be released. We don't need to promote the dependencies, and we are going to use the copy. Although Docker images are usually huge, we don't care, because since Artifactory uses checksum-based storage, it deduplicates the files, so copy is virtually free. We don't actually duplicate the files, right? And then we promote it, and it is actually done. So this is our build. Now, again, let's run it and see. And see what's going on. Here we have our step 2 create Docker image template, the credentials, the server URL, the Docker registry that we're going to use. And now let's run the build. Okay, this is our pipeline. Download Java and Tomcat, build the image, build another temporary image that will use this image as a base, but also add the latest good known application file and run some tests on it. If the tests are successful, also scan this framework image with X-ray, and in case both of those are good, promote them to be used in the future application builds as a new base. That's what we have. So let's see what's going on. Okay, so this is what we see here. We download the GGK, we download Tomcat, and then we actually run the build. Here, that's the output of a Docker build from Ubuntu latest, and then add Java, and then add Tomcat, and this is actually done. Now, next step, we run the build again, but this time we also add our application file. Here is our application file, latest good known application file, and run some tests. This is the curl that we run to check that our Docker image actually looks like what we expect it to be. We get back an HTML page, which matches the HTML page that we expect, and that means that the test is passed successfully. And once this is done, we are deleting the temporary image because we don't need it anymore, and start an X-ray scan. In this case, X-ray scan will take a little bit longer just because it's Docker, it's tons of layers, and each and every one of them should be examined and going recursively into each and every level inside those layers. But here we have a result, and apparently it has some issues as well. Now we don't do anything with those issues, just to show you how the promotion works. But of course, in real life, in case of issues, you actually should do something with it. Going back to Artifactory, let's see what we have in builds. So here we have our base image, build number 9, actually already recorded in Artifactory, and we can dive into it and see what's going on. Release history is currently empty, and we're going to get back to it and see how it is populated. We're going to talk about that in a second. So general build info is what you expect it to be. We have this name. It was built in Jenkins using pipelines. It took a minute, and the published modules include actually 2 different modules. One is downloading the dependencies, and here are our dependencies, our Apache Tomcat and our JDK, and the a Docker build information have all the Docker layers either as artifacts. Those are all the new artifacts that we produced, bunch of different layers, or the dependencies. And those are the layers that actually came as a dependency because we used Ubuntu as our base. So all those are layers of Ubuntu. Environment variables were recorded exactly as in the previous example. And now in the release history, we actually have the promotion recorded. It wasn't there before just because the X-ray scan didn't finish yet. But now when the X-ray scan is finished and we took into consideration those two, that the test pass and X-ray scan was successful, well, it wasn't, but let's pretend it was. Now we are allowed to promote it. And the promotion is, as you remember, we took a configuration of where we want to copy to where we want to copy, which message, and then said, okay, promote it inside Artifactory. So it actually moved it from Docker dev local into Docker prod local, and that's the repository in which we have Docker images which are ready to use as a base for our production, and framework test with latest version of application. That's the comment that we want. And the Artifactory user that did it was Jenkins, because it was done in Jenkins. So here's a question: how do you manage exception in Jenkins file with Groovy? Do we use if else, or the best way to do it? So generally Groovy doesn't have checked exceptions. So all the exceptions that are fired during the process will be propagated to the build and will fail the build. If you know that you have exceptions that you don't want to fail the build for, you should wrap them with try and catch and do something. And if you want to fail the build, you can just throw an exception and it will fail the build because they will be propagated to Jenkins and fail the build. Okay, 10 minutes to go, one pipeline left. Everything is looking good. So let's go back to Jenkins and look at our third pipeline, which combines the previous two. It will take the base image that we just created and promoted. It will take the WAR file that was created in the previous build, put it on the base image, and we will have a production Docker image. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So what we're going to look now is the create Docker image product. That's the application. So again, we're going to, you know what, let's run it now. And while it runs, we will review the configuration, save some time. So build, here you go. Again, bunch of parameters, all you're familiar with: server URL, which registry to use, which repository to which we should promote it, and then the X-ray scan. It's all the same stuff. And while it is running, let's see the configuration. Okay, I'm going to copy. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look. So you already know what to expect. We check out the code, we have Artifactory, we configure new build info, and now we want to capture the environment variables. First step, we're going to download the dependencies. In our example here, the dependency is the WAR file. So we're going to go to Gradle release local. We only want the artifacts which are ready to be released, and we are going to take the latest WAR for which we have unit tests set to pass. That's the latest WAR which are allowed to be used. We're going to download this dependency, and now we're going to build our Docker build. So again, docker.build, and we want to look, or we want to take a look on the build file. So we're going to our swamp app, and we need now Docker product or Docker app. Docker app, here we go. That's our Docker file. And in our Docker file, we take our latest known good Docker framework. That's the one that we just built. And we take the Word file that we downloaded, which is a latest good known application, and add it into the web apps folder of our Tomcat. And Tomcat, if you remember, we added when we build the base. And now when everything is good, we run our Tomcat application and actually have our application up and running. So let's go back right here. So yeah, we do the Docker build and everything's good. Now it's time for testing. What we're going to take is, we want a clean build. So we're going to remove the local Docker image. We're going to download the latest known Docker image, which will be this image, and then we're going to test it. Now, again, how we're testing it, pretty much the same way, right? We are going to run it, and then we're going to curl it. We're going to verify that the content that we got from this page is actually what we expected. Again, pretty silly test, good for this example. And then we're going to return either true or false if the content matches or doesn't match. That will be the test part, right? So we test the app, and then if it is successful, we're going to set the property, and otherwise we are going to mark it unstable. Next step is X-ray scan. Again, same here. We send the request to scan this build, and then if the build is unstable, we will probably want to fail this build here. But again, for the sake of this example, we won't do it. Instead, we will just print the results. And if everything is good, tests are passed, and X-ray scan was valid, we're going to promote. We're going to take it from Docker stage local and going to put it into Docker prod local. And of course, then it is available for usage. Promotion config. And the last step is a retag latest. Just a real quick about that. What we're going to do here is we're going to create a new tag for the same image called latest. So our image will be shown under two different tags. The actual number of the build, which is very important because it gives you traceability, and as the latest, which makes it very easy for you to use it, because you can just say, give me the latest, and you're guaranteed to get the latest good build. So we are running out of time, so let's just see that it worked and take a look at it then in Artifactory and X-ray. So what we see here is our latest build number 9, built just now. It was successful. We can go to Artifactory here and see the same picture again. Here we go, general build info. We have everything in published modules. We will see our dependency. That's our Word file right here. And from here, we can go to this dependency. And for example, back to its build through the build navigation. That's our number 12. That's what we did 20 minutes ago. And it was added as a dependency to our Docker build file. So here we see, and if we were going back to the file here, we will see that it was actually used by our Docker build. Here, it was used by Docker image product build, which is kind of cool because we have this traceability. Now, let's look how this latest build of everything together looks in X-ray. So in X-ray, we have an alert generated for this build as well. Order-bound build generate alerts, and that's by design to show you some examples. Build number 9 of step 3, that's the latest alerts that we have here. Again, tons of vulnerabilities, what's not? But look at that. We actually managed here to find this struts vulnerability, which was inside a custom Word file, inside the Docker layer, inside the Docker image, inside the Docker build, which is like 5 layers deep, because we, as I mentioned, constructed the software composition of this Docker image. We went five levels deep to find this jar file and alert it. And we can do the other way around. We can do impact analysis. We can say, okay, I want to find this struts2 guy, and it will be a package of Maven type because it's Java. And now when I find it, I can go into it and take a look of what is it, right? So I can see all the vulnerabilities here, and I can actually see where it is. I can do an impact analysis. Gee, it's in a bunch of WAR files. How bad it is, we don't know, because we are not sure if those WAR files is ever used. But we can go deeper and we see, okay, this WAR file is indeed in a Docker layer. How bad it is? Well, we don't know. Maybe this layer is not used in any Docker image. We can go deep and say, okay, it is used in a Docker image. It's actually in 2 Docker images, or it's the same with different tags. Number 13 and latest. How bad is that? We don't know as well, because maybe it wasn't deployed to production ever. But we can go here and actually see, we can view the component details and see where it is in Artifactory. And we can see here that it is in our Artifactory HA build, and it's a production build, so it's in production, and I do have a problem. So with that, we run out of time. So let me just see if we have any additional questions. How to get the result from the test instead of stating static pass-fail from environment variable? Well, it really depends on which tests you run. In our example, the tests were really naive. We just played with it inside the Jenkins file, but you'll probably use some proper testing tools that will interact with Jenkins and just fail the build. So I guess that will be my answer. A lot of other questions, of course, were asked during the webinar, which is great. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to send them our way as a reply to the follow-up email that you will get, or ping me on Twitter at jbaruch or anything else. And I guess with that, as I mentioned, the recording is live on Jfrog YouTube channel. You will get an email with the recording as well. Thank you very much for attending, and I hope you enjoyed this one. On the next steps are very, very simple. This environment live for additional 4 days, so go ahead and play with it. You can ruin it in any way you like. It's just a virtual machine that will be destroyed in the end of the trial. Next step will be a real trial in which you get a real instance of Artifactory and X-Ray. It can be on the cloud, it can be on-prem, you download and set up it. And this is something for your setup. So you will set up your own build pipelines, which make sense for you with your real data. And once you buy this, of course, data will stick around. It will be a real trial. Give it a try. Play with your temporary trial now. Download a real trial once this is done, and let us know if you need any help. Thank you very much, and see you in future webinars.